So in this episode I've got a couple of things to do. One is to start focusing on the fiberglass part. So this is the transmission cover. Then I've got the intake plenum here, and I've got the radiator cowling. Now most of that is just stripping back the parts so that I can get them to a point where I can repaint them. So I don't think there's anything structurally wrong with them, but obviously with all the under seal on this, for instance, there's a fair bit of work to strip all that back off. After a fair bit of scraping with this blunt wood chisel, I've now taken off the layer of underseal that was on there, but also the layer of paint. So I'm now back to the original fiberglass, which is really good. So satisfyingly, just kind of, you can hear a nice little kind of flaking sound as the original paint comes off. So hopefully, without too much preparation, it'll be possible to clean this down, degrease it, and repaint it in fresh Hammerite. So I'm just going to carry on. So if you look carefully, you can kind of see the grain of the original fiberglass there. By comparison, this corner's been repainted. You can see there's a paint reaction up here. So if I scrape all that back and get it back to bare fiberglass, it should repaint and look like new. It's taken me about the best part of an hour to scrape all of the paint off this, but I'm now quite pleased with the result. I think I've got 99% of the paint off without actually scratching through and getting the fibres in the fiberglass to show through. I've quickly realised that the gearbox cover here isn't actually fiberglass, of course it's steel. All of the underseal here and the remains of the soundproofing and carpet and stuff that was stuck to it made it look like it was glass fibre. So, but regardless of that, it's still the same thing. That I'll put it in the sandblaster in a minute, but I need to get the worst of this stuff off first, and scraping it with this chisel still seems to be the most effective method. On the inside of the gearbox cover, I've got the remains of a red, I think slightly foamy seal here that would obviously compress up against the bulkhead. So I'm going to need to unpick all of that and replace it at some point. So now I'm back to using the chisel to get this underseal off, so I can then get it ready for the sandblaster. This is about ready for the sandblaster now, with all of the underseal scraped away and degreased. I just need to remove this seal. A couple of things to note before I strip this back in the sandblaster. The first being that this is silver grey, so this is the original colour of the car, because these were painted in body colour. The car was painted later in red, but there's no signs of that on here. So there are other places where I can get a reference for the colour, so I don't need to worry too much about that. Also, I need to straighten out some of the flanges around here where they've gone a bit bent over time. I don't think that happened when I was taking them off, but obviously if you don't have a straight flange, then you're not going to get a particularly good seal when this goes back up to the bulkhead. So I'm just going to use this hammer and dolly to straighten out some of the flanges. So now it's into the sandblaster to get all the paint off back to bare metal. Now I've got the air intake plenum here to refurbish. So this has had some damage in the past, so some extra washers have been put in around these rivets to reinforce this, which is obviously loose. Now these butterfly nuts go on the end here, so I need to make sure that this is correctly aligned so it'll actually go back on to feed the carburetors correctly with air. So I'm going to have to drill out these and refix them in place. With 56 years worth of dirt removed from the inside of the plenum here, I just need to give it a wipe down. It'll be ready for painting. On the outside, I can now start to work getting this back so that I can repair these holes and get them to the right size, ready to re-rivet. Quite a lot of loose and flaky paint here. Because this is the clean side of the air filter, really, this kind of stuff could flake off and easily go through the engine. This is really something I'd like to avoid. But because it's flaking off quite easily, it's quite easy to remove with this pair of scissors. You know, that kind of thing. Really don't want that going through the engine. It's taken me a long time to get this sanded back so that I've got a decent surface. This will be ready for paint, but first I need to repair these holes so I can re-drill and re-rivet the brackets that hold this onto the carburetors. So I've got a glass fibre repair kit, and I'm going to get some glass fibre mesh on the back here, get some resin mixed up and stick it all together. The resin's set now. Looks as though I can sand this all back, flatten it off. While that filler's going off on the plenum, I'm just going to clean up these brackets that go inside that attach this to the carburetors. Now that this is sanded down and just about ready for paint, I first of all need to drill the holes and get these brackets in the right position so that they'll align properly. Before I repaint this, I want these riveted in place so that I can paint over the rivet heads. But I can't put the brackets back in like this. They'd be perfectly okay, but you can see there's a little bit of surface rust there, and for the sake of completeness it'd be just nice to run these through the sandblaster, repaint them. It also looks like these wing nuts here were actually painted. While I'm at it, I'll sandblast these and repaint them as well. I can now rivet my freshly repainted and very nice looking, new looking brackets back into place. Excellent. Okay, fits nicely. Now to get this painted. With these two fiberglass parts restored, I can now put them out the way and keep them safe for when they actually need to be reassembled onto the car. This of course is an epoxy primer, so it's ready for primer and the base coat. Please join me next time when I'll be taking everything off that you can see here. Front suspension, steering rack, and everything to do with the brakes and the heating, so that I've got a bare frame and a bare bulkhead so that those can be stripped back and painted. Thanks very much for watching.